Well, welcome to Foundations of Honor, and you are in for a treat today. I have a couple of my good friends here. I, the planets have aligned. We are going to spend close to an hour together talking about things that are so important to you and what it is that you're doing in your environment, your family, your area of leadership and influence. Um, this topic of honor, I mean, we're sitting at the table with the architects of much of what it is that gets talked about in this idea of culture of honor. And Bill, Chris, thank you so much for being part of this. And we have so many things to talk about. We could talk for hours, actually. But what I would like to start off with is just a little bit of the history of the idea of a culture of honor. Where is it drawing from as we coin that term? Because the culture of honor is really something, in my experience, that somebody outside of our environment recognized. They said, "You have such a culture of honor here. I had never even noticed it before." It'd be like somebody saying, "You guys speak English in this environment." And you're like, "I didn't realize we had another choice." And so, Bill, much of it comes from your dad, Earl.
A culture of honor is where you treat another person as you would Jesus. That's really the basis, is that it has its foundation in your value for God. If it's man-centered, then it becomes humanistic, it becomes flattery, it becomes all the kinds of things that are perversions of the real thing. But when it starts, Paul said, submit yourself to one another in the fear of Christ. And so there's this value for people that starts with how I approach Jesus himself. And he says, when you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. And so that means that when I look at someone that I want to honor, they don't have to earn it because I'm doing it as I would do it to the Lord himself.
Yeah.
And that's the backbone.
Yeah, and I don't remember, growing up in Weaverville with you and Chris, I don't remember a message about honor. I just remember watching it. Do you remember teaching?
No, I didn't teach on, I taught on how to display honor, I mean, how to value people, but never, I don't remember ever teaching on the culture of honor. Never, ever. I didn't know you needed to. It wasn't
Until you met me.
it wasn't a decision.
Yeah.
It was a lifestyle. You can have honorable acts. You can choose to do an honorable act, and that's a good way to start the process. But the culture, a true culture, affects how you think, how you view the world, how you view yourself, what makes you get up in the morning, how your heart beats for certain things. It's because of that kingdom culture, the culture of honor.
Yeah.
And I learned it from my dad. I watched how he treated his quote unquote enemies, those who opposed him, those who would split the church, those who would cast the stones at him and just say all kinds of horrible things. And I watched how he treated them. And he ended up doing their funerals. He ended up visiting them in the hospital. He ended up, just showing them incredible, incredible mercy, because it's just the way he lived, when they least deserved it. And person after person would turn from, their evil ways, or literally, and religious evil ways. And they would turn to him because he would honor them when they didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up watching that, and just it was the only way to live,
Yeah, it's such a life transforming experience to cross paths with somebody that is leading in this mindset, or this this core value set that, I mean, and then you and I come from a whole nother experience of how
Kind
you
of
treat
honorable.
people. Well, not even really. And we end up just so impacted. I mean, when you think about the foundations of honor and culture, what comes to mind?
Again, we were talking a little bit earlier before the cameras rolled and I can't remember a message that Bill taught on honor, as far as like scripting a message. Like, I don't ever remember that, but Bill was the first man and Benny that I ever really felt like I mean, the words that come to my mind is he valued people. They valued people who they didn't necessarily agree with. They refused to speak negatively about people ever. And I mean, we lived with him for 6 months, and I can remember I had come up with a little bit different system than that. It was if you think it, say it kind of culture, and nothing's out of bounds, you know. So you know, I can remember just saying all kinds of crazy stuff about I just don't like that person. And Bill never said anything. I don't remember Bill saying much to me. He would just look at me, like he just refused to enter those conversations. So those kind of conversations about dishonoring conversation about other people, they never got momentum because Bill and Benny just
Didn't participate.
Refused to participate, and you sort of felt stupid for participating.
All alone.
Totally.
You got this all alone feeling.
I remember my son, he was in Miss Judy Derryberry's class, and this is during this whole time we were learning all this stuff. And of course, my kids and Bill's kids were the closest of friends, and actually still are very close friends. And I remember him coming home one day, and this is during that season where we're like learning about honor, And he said, and Judy had Mrs. Derryberry did something to him, corrected his homework, and made him do something over. So we're sitting around the table, and I said, so how's your day? How's your guys' day? And Jason said, well, that Mrs. Derryberry. And then he remembered, oh, we're not doing this anymore. She's the most amazing person. And he leans over and get something to eat and just looked down and kept eating. It's because we were learning how to adjust our mindset. One of the things we don't do is we don't have people for breakfast. We don't talk behind their backs. And it's not coming out of the discipline of not talking about people. It's coming out of the heart to love people that God loves and to think about people the way God thinks about them. And you and I weren't raised with that. So I remember the early days of trying to learn that, trying to assimilate that. And then at the same time, while you're doing that, trying to shift your family out of the culture you grew up with. Of course, my kids were very little at that time. So, yeah. So
it's like being bicultural for you and I. We have,
we can do
so
both. We speak Egyptian.
We speak Babylonian.
Egyptian.
And so we're
languages.
We're trying to adjust and choose. Whereas Bill's living in a flow of momentum where he's going, I didn't realize you had to teach someone to honor other people. I didn't dawn on me because it was just, there was just such a flow. So when he and Benny show up in our world, they're introducing us to how to think, how to what to value, how to how to introduce it to a group of Babylonians. I mean,
frankly, we're introducing them to a new culture also.
We are. They didn't pick up on it as quickly, though. I don't think they want it. So, so we have a very different, at this point in time, I mean, we have a lot of momentum as well now, and we're, so our excuses are fading away is what I'm saying. And so much of what we talk about, people hear it and they think, well, I'm gonna read this book and then I'm gonna teach my people. I'm gonna read this book and then our family culture is going to change. And it is so much more than that. I mean, what advice would you have for people who are kind of bicultural and they're really they don't have a possibly a Bill Johnson in their environment? I mean, what is it that what are we trying to grab onto so deeply that changes the way that we see the world and the way that we practice?
For me, it comes back to how I value the Lord and the presence of the Lord. If you violate that value, then you become dangerous to other people, because then your opinions become most important. Your personality traits become what you defend. But when you when you learn how to to model a value for the Holy Spirit in how you treat another person. You do it as unto the Lord. You do it as unto the Lord. It really makes honor fairly simple and fairly easy, because you're honoring someone who can't fail you. You know, you're not honoring someone because of what you're going to get in return. I'm not going to scratch your back so you can scratch mine. I am honoring you. I have value for who you are in God. I have value for His touch, His call on your life, all these things. I value you because you've been made in the image of God. But ultimately, I'm valuing you as unto the Lord. And while we will let one another down in how we respond to certain situations, He never lets us down. And so it's a foolproof way to maintaining honor, because you're not looking for reward. The reward is Him. You know, He consumes those moments with Himself.
So you're saying that when I interact with you and you have failed, or I interact with you and you have been disrespectful, that what I stay locked onto in my interactions with you is as though I am addressing the presence of the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a gift. You know, it's another one of those gifts that we can't give Him in heaven, because there'll be no conflict there. But I can give Him honor in that you've done it to the least of these. As I treat the least, I can do it as unto the Lord. I won't have that opportunity in heaven to give Him that kind of honor. And so we grab our moments here. And you only have those moments when there's conflict or disappointment, or, you know, those kinds of things. Yeah. So you grab those moments realizing that this is a divine moment. And I want to make sure I give Him the gift I can only give Him here.
I think when we talk about our culture, when we talk about our what we've lived in. I mean, I don't know anything else. You know, neither one of us. We've never been under another spiritual leader for any amount of time to where we would have to unlearn something. We've become very very free, very liberated in this culture, in this experience, meaning that, you know, we get to experiment, we get to risk, we get to we get to fail. I mean, when we talk about an experience of freedom in a culture and trying to lead in that, what would you say, Chris? What would you say? I mean, leading the School of Ministry, leading, in so many ways in our environment. What would you say are just real keys that you invest, that you purposefully sow into the environment to give people freedom to risk?
I think that, like I look at my life, and my life is it's a testimony to people who believed in me before I deserved it. And I think it's really easy to believe in somebody. I don't want to say after they deserve it, but I think for this basic conversation, it's like someone writes 5 books, and you're like, oh, you're going to be a writer. Okay, it doesn't take a lot of, but somebody can't spell, and you're like, I think there's a writing thing on you. That takes faith, Or somebody's, in my case, obviously that's not a secret. It's like a pretty rustic guy. I grew up in a pretty bad home, and then you have somebody who believes in you and who thinks the best of you, and I don't want to say almost is colorblind to that, but it's almost colorblind. Like, do you? And I have this picture as you were talking. Like, it's the difference between you have a coach, and he's you're on this basketball team. You have a coach, and he's yelling at you from the sideline. You missed the pass. It's like, and everybody's so amped. Like, I don't want to make a mistake. The coach is going to be mad at me. And I think that religious culture, and I'm using the word religion in just a neutral way, oftentimes, great leaders everybody wants to win the game. Everybody wants to have their people succeed. The worst leaders I think in the religious world want their people to succeed even. But they only know one style. It's like, yell from the sideline, you idiot, you dropped the ball. You better not disappoint me. There's a difference between that and a coach who's a really great coach, knows the game really well, has played better than any player on the court, and you run off the court when when it's your time, and the coach is like, that was a great play, and you threw away the ball twice, and he reminds you of the great shot you took in that 5 minutes you're on the court, and you're like, when someone believes in you like that, you don't want to disappoint him. And I'd suggest you play harder for that person than you do for fear. Because I grew up under both. I grew up under fear. I know what it's like to not want to fail because you're going to be punished, not just, And I know what it's like to play for a really good coach who obviously doesn't want you to make the mistakes. I mean, it's not, Bill's not ignorant or dumb. He's not like, doesn't know that you've just made a mistake. It's just like, he chooses to believe the best in you. And he taught me, like, you're better than your worst day. And so, it's like when someone loves you and honors you like that, you don't want to disappoint them. You have a more intense desire to please them than you do the coach who's screaming at you. And I think that's, so what I learned and how, and got to experience, I'm like, okay, I don't think I ever thought, like, how do I replicate this? I think it just became such a part of me that became the way I treat, our children, I think sometimes you don't know who you are and what you've learned until you leave your culture and you go into another culture and like, oh, yeah, we would never do that. Like I would, in my worst day, I would never think to behave like that. Then you realize, like, oh, that's a great guy. He hasn't been exposed to this. So I think those are the things. It's like, I don't want to be the coach, like in the school ministry. I don't want to be the coach on the sideline screaming at people, metaphorically speaking. I don't want to be, you better get this right, or, I want, like, relax, be at your best, do your best. And if something goes wrong, we'll talk about it. Well, we're not going to assassinate your character because something went wrong.
I remember the first Sunday night I did at Bethel. And do you remember that?
Glad you said it.
Oh, it was such a disaster, with showed this movie clip, and somewhere in the middle of that movie clip is the Lord's name in vain and cussing, and I was like, how did I miss that? And I couldn't believe it. We went through that whole night. Apparently, my name came up at the board meeting the following week, and I just remember on Thursday after the board meeting, Bill walking up to me and saying, "Are you available to preach on Sunday night?" And I said, "Were you at the board meeting?" Yep, I was at the board meeting, he says, and I'd like you to preach on Sunday night. And it just opened up this world, and it's the practice of acceptance, of love, of the strength of relationship, of you know what, you're greater than your worst day, and let me partner with you in living in that. I think that we also live in a world, a culture that has there's just so much in it. I mean, it's the goodness of God. I think it was Bobby Conner that said, "I dare you to try to exaggerate my goodness." I mean, when you talk about the goodness of God and the abundance that we carry, I mean, you always are putting on display just that there are no limits, and you are constantly kicking out the edges of our what we've known so far. I mean, there's so many testimonies of that. What would you, either one of you, say about just making sure that we protect an abundance, faith-filled mentality?
I don't know if it's a good place to start, but it certainly is involved in the equation, is stop blaming God for bad things that happen. Stop assuming that he approved of them because he had some divine purpose. Some things just happen in life because we're alive, and we're alive on an evil planet, and there's a lot of junk going on around us. And to give him credit for stuff, even the whole, well, he allowed it to happen. Just because he didn't intervene didn't mean that he had any purpose or plan in that tragedy or crisis. That would be crediting him with Hitler and all other kinds of things that are just nonsense. And I think it's a good place to begin is start rethinking how and why evil happens. And for me, the cornerstone of thought regarding the goodness of God is Jesus. Jesus is perfect theology. What did he do when he faced the storm? What did he do when he faced the opposition? What did he do when he faced betrayal? He shares a meal with the guys who are going to betray him in an hour. He shares a meal with those guys, and that's his. It's kind of his farewell meal, and yet it's a meal of honor that he honors them, knowing they're all going to forsake him.
Yeah, so good. Chris, we have a constant message going out to our people that they are powerful, that they are filled with the Holy Spirit, that the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is alive in us, and that is drawing us into this divine destiny of being a child of God on the planet, a co-laborer with Him. And at the same time, when you give that kind of permission for people to be that powerful, they have to be accountable. They have to be confrontable. And you are probably the catalyst, not probably, you are the catalyst of confrontation in our world, in our environment.
That's not the reputation I want to have, but it's true.
But it's true, and I think you've given us all permission to step up and to step into that maybe that anxiety zone that says, I could really hurt our relationship by addressing this in you, but if somebody doesn't address this, you're going to go off the rails. Talk to us about the kind of the motive that you bring to this place of let's bring this into the light. Let's tell the truth.
Yeah, I think that as far as confrontation has always been a part of my life. I grew up in it. I don't say it as a joke. Like I grew up in confrontation. That's what our family did. So that part, I think that part just came with my personality and who I am. I think that what's changed is I've learned how to confront honorably. Like, okay, so, and I've learned that to the level you empower people, you must confront them. Otherwise, you end up with Absalom. And David is a beautiful picture of someone who valued the presence of God, as Bill was sharing a few minutes ago. He valued the presence of God. He's a man after God's heart. And he was a valiant warrior against the enemies of God. And yet in fact, the Bible uses this phrase, he never confronted his sons. And so, and I was sharing that with John Paul Jackson some years ago, obviously before John passed, about this whole thing we were learning. And he said, do you know why David never confronted his sons? No, actually, that didn't. He said, well, his spiritual father, Saul, King Saul, misused his authority in his life and punished him, tried to kill him. And he said David reacted to that and did the opposite with his sons. And I thought that was very insightful. And so I think that, yeah, it's really important that when we give people all this freedom, that in the midst of this freedom, we're serious about when somebody does something that, that's destructive or just what necessitates a conversation, that we don't excuse ourselves. Oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Like, a proverb says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. So I think that one of the things I've learned and the way I've culturized confrontation, and I wish I could say 100%, but 90%, is that I don't step into the conversation in a confrontational way. And by the way, just for people who will be listening, I grew up, confrontation meant yell, scream, holler,
combat.
Conflict, combat, yeah. So maybe for some of the people who don't know our culture that might watch this, like, I'm not talking about yelling, screaming, calling people names. And specifically what I am saying is, if somebody does something that feels like it doesn't benefit the culture, hurts people, whatever, it's simply taking them aside and saying, hey, when you did this, this is how it felt, and what did you mean to do? And what I've learned is that when you confront people like that, and you just mirror back, this was destructive. You probably didn't mean that.
So you're looking for the goal.
I'm looking for the goal,
what
and
were you trying
I'm
to
dealing with Bill. You know, with what I experienced in Bill, and that is, I still believe in you. So you probably didn't mean to do this, but this is the
You're
outcome.
better than this.
You're better than this, yeah. And you know, and what I've learned is that probably a good 60-70% of the time, they didn't have any idea that's how they affected the culture. Or when they tell me their story, like, I did this and this to do that. I'm like, oh, you were, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, let me tell you something. That's not what happened. I'm with you. I'm totally with you. Okay, so let's talk about that. Like, so this is how people experience you. So what's another way you could go about that same thing and get that done? Or if, you know, somebody, sometimes we all do this probably, in anger or in frustration or something, we say something or do something. People maybe think, oh, well, he got over it. It's like, well, maybe he didn't. Maybe he needs you to say, I'm sorry. You know, and sometimes there's, like all of us, like, there's just no excuse. It's like, I just sort of forgot about it because I'm the one who did it. And
so often you're after an adjustment, you know, to not only protect that person, but also the whole environment. Because, you know, you're giving that person feedback that that thing that you set out to accomplish, not happening. As a matter of fact, this would be if this continues, this is going to be what's, you know, the
outcome.
The problem for other people.
Yeah.
So you as a leader stepping into that are saying, I'm not only am I looking out for your best interest, I'm also looking out for the whole and how you can help protect it. So please adjust.
Yeah, and one of the things you taught me, and I watched Bill demonstrate, but I heard you teach it one time, is when you confront, correct somebody, whatever words we want to use, and there is some synonyms in there, that's the time to stay close. And that's what, you know, Bill knew you had failed that Sunday night, and I could have guessed, like, not prophetically. Bill's going to have him preach against sin. I just know it.
He's got to shake that.
No, because that's how I grew up. It's like, okay, if Bill corrects me, or if Bill knows I corrected myself. In this case, you already knew you did something wrong. Not a lot of conversation needs to be had. So it's like, you know, that's another thing. You know, if somebody comes up to you and they screwed up and they say I screwed up, I mean, there's not time to like, okay, let's reiterate that you messed up. It's like, I messed up. I threw the ball away. I don't need anyone to tell me I shouldn't have made that pass. But that's the time that the coach can put you back in the game, or make sure that you need to know in that moment that the coach believes in you.
I believe in you. Yeah.
So, you know, I could have predicted that you're going to preach again.
And I think, you know, this kind of leads us into the idea that pretty much everything that we are doing is to preserve relationships. I mean, we are trying to show people the Father and how much He loves them, to connect that relationship. We're enduring people's growth and mistakes to invest and to grow those relationships. You're sitting at a table. I mean, if collectively we almost have 100 years here at this table.
That's scary.
You know, and I think, all right, that is such a hallmark of success in cultivating honor together. And you've led the way. I mean, you've led the way in protecting, practicing covenant relationship. Why is that so vital?
Well, at the end of the day, you don't have much if you don't have friends, if you don't have family. You know, it's Proverbs says that the Lord, when He adds blessing to a life, He adds no sorrow with it. And there's a lot of wealthy people, if I can use money as a mark of blessing, there's a lot of wealthy people that don't have their family, or their partners in business don't trust them anymore. They've got what they went after, but they have sorrow with it. And when you have kingdom vision, when you have a heart to please the Lord and to honor Him and to do great exploits, there's no sorrow with it when He's the one who adds the blessing, which means you're going to have fruitful relationships. To me, it means that you're not going to hurt here to get this. You're not going to sacrifice your family, your friends, your whatever, so that you can accomplish your great vision to save the world. It's not, that's not kingdom.
And so many people do exactly that. I mean, so many people are, I want to build a city, but I don't learn to love.
No, that's right. That's right. They want the accomplishment without the process. The process is community. The process to anything significant is community. The Bible says faith works through love. The two absolutes. The greatest of these is love. Without faith, you can't please God. So faith, that gift-oriented lifestyle, operates through relationship, through the value for God, the value for people. So they work in tandem, but they are absolutely. Let's love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbors yourself. It's like those two make the sandwich. They make the two sides of the same coin.
So, the experience of long-term covenant relationships is sitting at this table. I mean, it would be, we've had some really great confrontations, and we've had some horrible confrontations. Did not go well at all, and yet here we sit. We keep coming back to, we're going to protect the love above the issue. The issue's going to stay here, and we're going to attack that from a posture of keeping our connection, our relationship, to master the issue instead of the issue mastering our love. So, absolutely. Often we talk about changing the world. We talk about that we have a live experiment going on at home in a local church, in a school of ministry, in a community. We talk a lot about exporting. We have something that we focus on so that we can export. Either one of you guys, I mean, Bill, you I've heard you say probably the most is that we're exporters. That's what we do. What do you mean by that?
Well, we go all over the world. The books, the music, all the things we do, they're sent out all over the world. We send teams, people out. But you have to have something at home to take out. If you're an exporter, I don't want our team to just be itinerant people who travel with a message and bless. There's a place for that. It's just not our place. Our place is export, which means you have to have the breakthrough at home so that you can take it somewhere else. You have to have the experience at home. You have to be able to have tested what God has shown you in the context of community, see if it works, see if it's legitimate. Because when you have the experience of that truth under your belt, when you speak or when you sing, whatever you do, you actually release a grace that empowers people to become what you just taught. If you don't do that, you tickle ears. You entice people with ideas, and they can, on their own journey, discover it, but it doesn't have the same power. The power is released when you're speaking out of your own encounter with God, your own walk with the Lord, your own context of community. There's a lot of people with great ideas about generosity that have no money. Now, the best way to find out what they think about money is give them some money, see what they do with it. See once they have the experience, see the great ideas get toned down. People who aren't married have great ideas what they think marriage should be like. Get married, talk to me in 5 years, and let's see how you define it then, because it's the experience.
So you're talking the difference between a teaching and an impartation.
Exactly. That's totally it. Because the experience means you're an imparter of grace. Yeah.
Totally. Chris, talk a little bit about exporting culture, exporting honor to a city.
Yeah, I think that what we live in our own, well, it begins in our own home, doesn't it? And I want to just say amen to what Bill said. And I remember there was a card on his desk. I'll get there in a second. There used to be a card, little 3x5 card on your desk that said, "Whatever feeds me, feeds them." And one day, I don't know if you remember this dialogue, but I've shared it many times. I was talking to you about teaching. You said, I never studied to teach. I only studied to learn. And it's the whole concept that it has to happen in me before it happens through me. Yeah, I mean, I can teach what I know, but I only impart who I am. And I was just thinking when you said that, like, this is the difference between teaching and impartation, I would, of course, agree, but I would I would argue that there shouldn't be. Like teaching should be impartation. Like I should be teaching what I actually know. And I think that when we live like that in our homes and then corporately as a family, then we begin to model that for our city, and then we begin to model it to our city, and then we begin to model it for our city. And so we've made some really great connections in our city, just out of that culture of, okay, how do we honor our city? So we've had these conversations like, I love Heidi Baker's message. I've heard it many times on the road. Love looks like something. So it's like we're talking about honor today, but it's really just love. Like love's just an expression. Honor is an expression of love. It's like, so what does? Because you and I both know, like we all know, like some people say, "Oh, I agree with honor," and like we've all had those experiences with people. Like they agree with. I loved your book on honor. That Danny's book on honor. I'm like, I have felt so dishonored since I've been here. And I'm like, okay, so honor looks like something. Like it has to actually be something I can, Bill says, Jesus is perfect theology. Like I can touch him. I can touch theology. It's not like something out there. So, and I remember we started having meetings, and I don't remember probably the first one, but some of them I remember the season where we started looking more outward. Not in an evangelistic way, because we've always done that, but looking outward like, okay, the city is our responsibility. What are we doing about it? And, there was a lot of just, philosophical philosophical thoughts. And kind of like Bill said, we have lots of thoughts on what marriage should look like before you get married. And we're having those kind of thoughts with our city. Like, okay, we've reached our poor, and we're reaching to our poor. We're helping. How do we actually disciple our city? And lots of dialogue around that, right? You guys can remember lots of the dialogue, and it's like, okay, well, how about honor? Like, okay, how would we honor our city fathers? Like in a felt way, because most of them aren't believers. So how? And I think that led to several things. Like we give 10% of our plate income to our city out of that, and we sat down with one of our city fathers and.
Bill said, the tithe, 10% of the tithe.
Yeah, 10% of the tithe, yeah. Yes, 10% of the tithe. And so we sat down with one of our city fathers and said, we want to tithe. We didn't use the word tithe. We said, we want to give 10% of our tithe to the city. And he was like, oh, well, you can give it here, we can give it there. And I think he named like 4 places. And thankfully, all 4 of those places we already give. And we're like, yeah, we give to that. And then Bill talked to him about the fact, like, in plain language, like the people laid money at the apostles' feet. Because as soon as Bill said, well, yeah, we want to give this to you, he said, okay, well, what do you want us to do with it? And part of honor is, I trust you. Like one of the roots of honor, or branches, however you want to look at it, it's like,
Didn't you actually say that to them?
I did. I said in the Bible, there was a time where people got together, they took an offering, they laid it at the apostles' feet because they trusted them to invest it correctly. We're here because we trust you. Yeah.
He literally sent the message. We trust you, a leader. It may be the
most powerful leader in our city.
Yeah, and we trust you.
And he was noticeably taken back. I mean, he was like, well, thank you, but thank you, but. And and then we didn't leave it there. Like we said, one of the things I said is like we'd like to make an agreement that we can meet with you once a year to hear what's on your heart for our city, so we could think about where we can fund it, and we'd like to take extra offerings also for those projects.
So we export honor by honoring.
Yeah, it's like it has to actually look like
so deep, but it is. I don't know why, but a lot of folks think that we're going to affect our city by protesting, by resisting, by opposing, by judging, and we can look back and see that all that does is it just creates this greater chasm of anxiety. And one of the things that you've done so well, that our community has done so well, is lower that anxiety between the belief that there's an us and them, because there isn't. We are part of this community. We love you. We honor you. And the response is, We love you. We honor you. How can we help you be successful? Which is just been so amazing.
I think you only have as much influence in people's lives as they have value for you. So if you come over here and destroy value and then wonder why you have no influence, I'm like, hello.
Hello, there we go.
Hello. But what's it like for the city fathers and mothers when you're honoring them? And I'm not talking about giving them money, because we work in our city. We put hundreds of thousands of hours of work into our city, with our students working every week in our city and all of that. But what's it like for them when we are helping to meet their desires, and then we come over here and say, hey, we've been in need over here? I mean, like, who doesn't want to meet that? It's like, okay. So I'm saying honor begins to flow both ways, because it's reciprocated, you know?
Yeah, and it's community. We are just simply living in community with our community, instead of building this, we're going to try to, we're going to trick you into believing something. Like, no, it's very much what we had just talked about. We look at you as we would revere and honor the Lord himself. I mean, that's a great definition of honor. Let me ask you, we are, like it or not, we're getting older. We're getting older. I've seen pictures of when I was younger. I looked different, and so do you guys. I've seen pictures of you when you were younger, and we
wish I could remember those days.
We have an inheritance. We have something to hand to the next generation, and so do people who are watching this. They're thinking, how do we best serve, invest, empower, work together with this next generation? How would you advise them?
Well, what my dad did for me is he modeled it. It was a lifestyle. It was an atmosphere that he created wherever he had influence that permeated the atmosphere. And when you model something, it's a lot easier to follow. Secondly, you've got to communicate it the best you can. Communicate, get understanding. I love what John Paul Jackson said to us years ago about his dream interpretation gift. I'll never forget how somebody asked him, how'd you do that? And he said, I don't know. And they said,
interpreting dreams.
About interpreting dreams, yeah. And he says, I don't know. And the guy said, that's too bad, because if you understood, you could train others, but now you're the only one, with that gift. And that means that's where the wisdom understanding element comes in, that we can dissect the grace that God has given us to make it communicable to other people. So I think if we can model, if we can articulate the specifics, and then third, empower. You've got to create room for people to learn, which means to make mistakes, to experiment, and don't put boundaries. Don't put boundaries on what they can accomplish.
No limitations.
Yeah, prophesy to them that they will go beyond what you ever hoped to accomplish, and then get out of the way. Be the biggest cheerleader and the supporter, but let them know that it's not only going to happen, it's okay. And I'm your biggest cheerleader, and if I'm not here to watch it happen, I'll hopefully be in the cloud of witnesses to watch it from there. Hopefully I get a ringside seat, But the point is you have to empower and prophetically describe as much as you can without restraints, without constrictions. Yeah.
At a managerial level, an operations level of an organization, whether it's a business or a church environment or whatever, how would you advise people to set the next generation up for success?
Well, I think we're doing it with Eric. I think we're doing it with lots of our next generation team. I was going to say young team. They're actually not young anymore. They're almost, Eric's like close to 40. So, but I think that, the Peter Principle says that you can be promoted beyond your ability to perform. And so we don't want to like throw you in a deep end of the pool, walk away and call that succession. That's been done. Or we walk away and like, whatever. But we don't want to be absent. Like, being absent is not being empowering. What I mean is stepping away and giving someone everything, that's not being empowering. That's being absent. And so empowering is proactive. it's not reactive, and it's not inactive. So, what we've done with Eric, and I think it's been really beautiful, it's becoming a beautiful model as it unfolds. It's not, we're in the midst of it, but we're like, okay, you run this, so you run second year. Okay, you've done that successfully. Okay, you take on the church. Okay, you've done that successfully. Okay, I think this year we've given him 3 more departments with Candace. That's like, it's great. He's learning, and this year he's taken on, this last couple, 3 years especially, just really taken on the challenge of the finances for that. So it's like, okay, you run the ministry. Okay, here's the financial part of that. Okay, you're going to need to learn this.
So you're present, walking along, and at the same time, trusting,
Giving
honoring.
pieces.
This, here we go again. I believe in you. You can do this. Oops, that didn't work out. Let's try it again. Bam, 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 bam. And we are walking alongside throughout the whole transition, where there is a
Passing the baton.
successful transition of power.
And a really important thing I was thinking about the other day, and I think someone's expressed it actually in our team recently, but I was thinking about, I ran track and I ran the 440 relay. And the most vulnerable time is when you're about to pass the baton. And what doesn't happen is this guy doesn't stop and hand the baton. So, and the important thing is that this guy and this guy, the only way it happens successfully is this guy runs as fast as this guy. And where you lose is if this guy has to slow down for this guy, or this guy is so fast he runs into this guy. So this is the dance. It's like we run together, and this might, and it's marked out, by the way, if you've ever noticed in a relay. I have to not take the baton before here, and I have to have it go on before here. And if that represents, 5 years, 10 years, 20, depending, it's like in this year's time, you have to get up to the same speed I'm going. I can't run away from you. And it's not a good baton pass if I slow down and you run into me.
So it's a real dance. I mean, it really is an art that
Yes.
you're talking about. And absolutely.
Yeah. We're kind of in the midst of that baton pass in the next few years, several years for us.
Okay, one last piece of advice from both of you. If you could say to a leader who is saying, I am creating a culture of honor in my environment, Bill, what would you say? Be sure to do what?
Don't create a culture that serves you. Don't create a culture of honor where you're the one that receives the honor. It's, we have a lot of people that they'll tell us, come help us create a culture of honor, teach on this and that. My people just don't respect me, or my board doesn't respect me, or whatever. And it's just the absolute worst way to create a culture of honor, because then you use flattery as manipulation to get your way, and it's not honor. And so you can't create a culture out of personal need. You have to create a culture out of values, out of a value for what pleases him, what he takes delight in, what he wants to inhabit.
So honor isn't about what you get. Honor is about what you give.
And the way the kingdom works is you're always going to receive. It's whatever you plant, that's what you're going to harvest. You show mercy, you're going to receive mercy. So the way the kingdom works is if you give honor, it's going to come back to you. But when it becomes the target, it becomes perverted.
And so if a leader is honoring to get it, they're leading in that culture, so the people will give to get.
No, exactly right. And it's not actually honor. Yeah.
Which is the key point.
It's just manipulation.
It's manipulation. Chris?
And I would also say that it may be intention of that, or it sounds like it's intention, and it isn't really, but there are levels of honor. So we've come to a rectangular table. Jesus talked about, when you come to a banquet that you've been invited to, don't take the seat that's too high for yourself. Meaning that because someone who's more distinguished than you will come and say, hey, move down. And so there are levels of distinction, and I think the gift of discerning of spirits, distinguishing of spirits, oftentimes is one of the ways that we see honor on someone. We see, if you will, anointing on somebody, and it's really important that we don't create a round table where this is honor, kumbaya, we're all honoring everybody. It's like, oh yeah, we have to honor all men. Paul said that in Romans. At the same time, we have to recognize, in fact, Paul says it this way, give honor to whom honor's due. And it's important that we that we honor people in the place that they have in God, and that we ask God for the discerning or distinguishing of spirits, so that we can say that person deserves more honor. Let's just say me. That person deserves more honor than me, and therefore I honor them in a way that that puts me in right alignment. The anointing starts with Aaron's head and flows all the way over his body. When we get out of alignment, we create dripping points for the anointing. And so I think it's important that in this teaching of honor, as Bill was talking about, people wanting to be, they create self-honor, like honor me. The other side of it is, I think, is that people are like, oh, we're all equal. Like, oh, no, we're not all equal. We're all equal in the sense that we're all children of God.
We're all powerful. We're
all
all
powerful.
loved. We all are honored.
Honored, yeah, but we're not all equally powerful, and we're to recognize the anointing on other people, and make sure that we realize that we have not come to a round table; we've come to a rectangular table where there are literally levels of honor. So I think that's really important, especially in a leadership culture, because when we start teaching this, people are like, some people begin to like honor themselves in a way. It's like, well, I should be. Well, if I'm in a culture of honor, why shouldn't I just be just as honored as my leader? It's like, okay, that's the reaction to what Bill was sharing. And the other side is, no, you still have to honor people for the level of honor that God's given them.
And there are always going to be people who are more responsible in the environment. And as a result, they're going to have more authority. It's going to sort out the organizational structure simply because you carry more responsibility, you carry more authority. And here we go. I mean, this is just a matter of practice of organization.
Is it not Aaron's rod where when Korah complained about Aaron being honored above them, and Moses has them all take an almond rod, and the next day Aaron said, I think it had
buds, sprouts, blossoms, and almonds.
Yeah, and so 4 stages of growth, 4 stages of anointing on his life. And so, we have to be careful when we're teaching this so that we don't end up with a kumbaya round table mess.
Yeah. Well, and that's, that is, it's so important that when we walk away from the idea of creating a culture of honor, that we don't create a culture of leaderlessness, that we don't create a culture of, it's not a culture of harmony where it is a kumbaya and everybody's always getting along all the time. This powerful group, this environment is powerful, changing the world, and powerful people make powerful messes, and we have to stay in there, and we have to love well and protect our covenant relationships while we change the world. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for what you have poured into my life and how we've just spent so many years doing what we're doing, and that's what I wanted to show you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And so there you have it, the foundations of honor. I've tried to lay them out the best I know to help communicate in such a way that makes sense, to supply the answers to a lot of the questions that I've got for years just traveling around. This idea that we need an abundance mentality. We need to see the vastness that is available to us in all our options. That helps us to provide this freedom that we talked so much about creating a place where people can happen, where their dreams can be realized, where we can lower anxiety so that their creative nature, the deposit that God has made in them can be on display. That's the environment that we're working to create in our families, in our marriage, in our churches, in our communities, our cities. I mean, a city that was filled with honor, a city that would be famous for honor. It's not impossible. It's the will of God. Heaven would come to the earth and saturate the world around us with abundance, with the goodness that God has, and literally push fear away so that it would bring out the very best in the people that we know and we love. Successful relationships built in the context of freedom, meaning that I'm governing myself towards connection, that I'm aware that my decisions in relationship are rooted in a choice, and that choice is based in this freedom. Creating powerful people, working together, knowing that there will be mistakes, there will be disagreements, there will be conflict, there will be struggle. And so being willing to speak the truth in love to one another, being willing to make known who's inside, let you know what I need. Successful confrontations begin to build relationship strength, health, longevity. This is what we're doing. We're trying to practice what Jesus made so clear to us, and that is that we'd love each other, that we'd love each other well, that we would put on display the love that He's shown us, we would give to each other. And so in response to that, we end up building relationships that last a lifetime. We end up with relationships that are covenant in nature, meaning that I intend to be available and to invest for my lifetime with you. We may not see each other for a decade. Nonetheless, I continue to pour into the relationship, your family, the scripture that talks about, I will be a friend to my friends' sons. You know, I will literally build relationships with the anticipation that I will be a service, a resource, a relationship to sons and daughters of my friends, to their children. I live in community, and I expect this life that I'm living to affect people I've not even met yet. This is part of the quality and the strength that honor builds deep inside of us. It builds an anticipation of what God is going to do through eternity. But I have a brief time on this planet. I have a little bit of time to affect as much as I possibly can. I want to do a good job of surrounding myself with powerful people, people that are brilliant, people that are capable, people that are creative, people that have dreams and visions, and build teams to accomplish great dreams together. Just as you heard, some of my friends talking about how do we light the desire in somebody's life and watch them fully happen. How do we do this? How do we empower our people to the point to where their life gets to unfold before us? How do we lead that? How do we cultivate that? How do I create an environment where people get to happen around me? That I get to happen around other leaders. How do we create that? Well, this is the idea of honor. It goes on and on and on in succession. It goes on for generations to come. We are taking this experience that we have inside of a somewhat controlled environment, in that we all share so many things. We believe so similarly, and so that it's kind of an incubator. The church is very much a place where you can do things almost artificially, but it's really of no value if it's not transforming our community. So how do we do that? How do we build a community that is representing heaven on earth? Well, we do that by participating in it. We do that by owning it. We do that by separating that line that would say us and them, and participate with our lives, with our love, with our covenant, and raising up leaders for tomorrow. That's what today's about. Today is about finding capable leaders for tomorrow, empowering them, investing in them, releasing them, giving them opportunities to happen, giving them opportunities to flourish, to make mistakes, to make messes, teach them how to clean it up, teach them how to, make progress. Fall forward. If you're going to fall forward. I'm cheering you on. I'm believing in you. And again, we hear that the number one thing that we need from each other is that you believe in me. Honor is this vast experience that creates such wholeness and hugeness as we live it together. I'm hoping that what you experience in this series, together with the study guide, is that you learn how to replicate at an even deeper level this culture of honor, this experience of wholeness towards one another. I want to be surrounded by powerful people who are working together to meet the needs of each other and the needs of the whole situation, the needs of the community, the needs of a generation, really, in many ways, to the point to where we become leaders in it. We become leaders in freedom. We become leaders in wholeness. We become leaders in long-term relationships. Thank you for spending time going through this series, and I hope that you've been touched by the quality of the people that you got to hear from. I hope that you got to see that dynamic at the table where people who are living in honoring one another, they love each other, they're fighting for the relationships, even sometimes while fighting in the relationships, that there's a brilliance to their countenance and to the life that they're living, and they communicate hope, they communicate power, they communicate faith and trust, and I pray that you receive an impartation of those things that you can then give away and transform the community around you. Thanks again for being part of this and joining in on what it is that we're doing. God bless you.